So, we already know that humanity suffers from the consequences of original sin. When we are born into this world, we don't tend automatically towards the good, but rather to self-centered egotism. We prefer to revolve around ourselves. We lack true friendship with God. We lack sanctifying grace. We lack the supernatural life that develops out of grace. So, we're lacking a few things. But what we have in abundance are faults and sins. A whole mountain of them. All of this stands between us and God. So how do we get rid of this mountain? We can be sorry for our sins, and this is the first step. But sin, as we've already talked about, is in the end always a lack of love towards God. It offends God and therefore requires His pardon. God has to act. That's the only way we're going to get rid of the mountain. So God has to act. And He does. Of course, a single word from God would be enough to wipe away our sins. But He chose another way, a way that brings man back to Him in a superabundant and most beautiful way. God becomes man. And He becomes man to accomplish three things. First, after what we've been talking about, you can probably guess this one. He becomes man to save us. How exactly this redemption works, we'll try to understand later. But at any rate, Jesus does something that gets rid of the mountain of sin. In Jesus, God acts so sin no longer separates us from Him. Second, when God becomes man, He no longer speaks to us through prophets, but He Himself speaks to us. Jesus brings us the fullness of God's revelation. More and deeper than ever before, we can realize who God is. And the more we know God, the better we can love Him. Third, in His words and in His deeds, Jesus gives us an example of how to live a just life. He shows us the way that leads to heaven. These three things God accomplished by becoming man. And in fact, there is one particular moment in the life of Christ where these three things come together perfectly: on the cross. On the cross, our redemption is accomplished. On the cross, we realize the truth that God is love. And on the cross, we are given the perfect example of self-giving love, so that we can shape our every thought, word, and deed by it. This is why God became man.